to announce that right now, we are being joined by our newest campus, the Bullitt County campus. Welcome, Bullitt County, to the family. What a strange time to launch a new campus, but we have seen God's hand at work in you and through you and your community over the last number of months, but really long before that. In some ways, this feels long overdue to say welcome to the Southeast family. We are so excited about what God is going to do in you and through you at that campus. On Sunday night of last week, I was at the Bullitt County Fairgrounds. They had hundreds of people that had gathered there that were going to be a part of this campus, that were volunteering and going to be leading at this campus. And it was incredible. There's another baptism, again, in the feeding trough. Just beautiful to see what God is doing there. It's been interesting, really, in this season where so much has been taken from us and we've lost so much, at least it feels that way at times, to see how God continues to be at work, how he continues to bear fruit. Like, it's not how we had planned. It's not what we had been working towards. It wasn't part of what we had had in mind for 2020, but God has been faithful, and he accomplishes his good work in any and every situation. It's one of the things I love about Jesus, that he can redeem anything. And if it's not good yet, it just means he isn't done yet. And we continue to see the way he works for good in and through our church, loving one person at a time. We're wrapping up a series this weekend in chapter 15 of John, and we're going to start chapter 16 next week. But the title of this series in chapter 15 has been Be the Branch, and that's a mantra for us at this church. That we're not going to put our confidence in ourselves to accomplish what God has called us to do. We're going to put our confidence in the vine. Our job is to be the branch and stay connected to the vine. If a branch is no longer connected to the vine, it's a stick. It's not good for anything, Jesus says, except to be picked up and thrown into the fire pile. Like, that's all it's good for if it's not connected to the vine. And so when we start to put confidence in ourselves and in our own efforts and our own ideas and our own worthiness, it leaves us feeling frustrated, discouraged, overwhelmed. And so we want to be reminded, especially in this season, that we are the branch. Our job is to stay connected to Jesus no matter what. And then we trust him for the production. We make sure the connection is there, and then we trust him to bear the fruit. But in this world that we live in right now, it's especially difficult to know what we should be doing. It's a divisive time. It seems like everyone's taken sides, even when it seems like those sides shouldn't necessarily be against each other. People want to put you in one category or another, on one side of the aisle or another. We see it with politics. We see it with the pandemic. We see it with protests. What side are you on? It's all about putting people on a certain side. And if you're not on one side, then you get blamed and shamed on the other side. It's just a very divisive time. And you see this in all kinds of areas. I've seen it recently on our staff in just little things. Like, for example, there's a lot of divisiveness right now on our staff between coffee drinkers. Like, there's a certain segment of us that really like the cheap coffee. Like, I'm a gas station coffee guy. If I can't get it at the gas station, I'm fine with the Keurig. You know, McDonald's K-Cup from the Keurig. I'm great with that. And there's a group of us that are like that. Like, you know, we like our coffee simple. But then there's a group, a different team, different side of coffee snobs, coffee elitists. And they are hardcore when it comes to their coffee, and they will go to great lengths. Like, they're spending their future retirement on a cup of coffee. That's how committed they are to the side that they're on. And they'll like hand grind their own beans, and they do some pour over method. And like, the more whimsical you are when you make coffee, the better it tastes. It seems like that's the approach to it. They'll have a half a dozen apparatuses to make coffee, and none of them is a coffee maker. Like, they're all kinds of different pieces of equipment to make their coffee. It makes me think like there's some kind of dark magic involved. It feels cultish. But I wanted to bridge the divide. Like, I don't like the divisiveness, and I'm not one to shame, right? So I decided I was gonna give it a try. I was gonna go to this coffee shop that I've heard a lot of them talk about. It's kind of like the temple where they go to worship, and they all kinds of money to try to please the coffee gods. And so I thought, I'll go try it. I'll try it. And I go into this place. Immediately, I didn't feel like I belonged. Like I was the only person there, I think, who had spent more money on the clothes I was wearing that day than the cup of coffee I would drink. Like, I think I was the only one who woke up and so I go up to the counter and I order a cup of coffee. I was told to order an espresso, so that's what I did. I said, I'll have an espresso. I didn't even know what that was. And the dude behind the counter is like, do you mean espresso? And I'm like, aren't we saying the same thing? He said, you said espresso. I think you meant espresso. Okay, all right, so that's how we're gonna do this. And I was intimidated though, I really was. And so I'm like, I'll just have a large coffee. I felt confident about that. And then he gave me another question I wasn't prepared for. He goes, well, what origin do you want? And I didn't have any idea what we were talking about. Like, I wanted to say Thornton's, but I knew that wasn't the right answer. So I didn't know what the right answer was. And I said, well, what do you recommend? And he said, I recommend our Peruvian single origin coffee. And I wasn't really sure, what that was. He said, you can taste the soil. I'm like, you can taste the dirt from Peru in your coffee, and that's what we want? Is that a good thing? So I ordered it and took a drink of it, and he could tell it didn't connect with me. And so he asked me about it. I said something, I didn't mean it to be as insulting as it came off, kind of like the espresso. I said, hey, it's nothing that enough cream and sugar can't fix. And apparently that was then they kicked me out. It was a whole scene. And there's two different sides, and we have different perspectives, different thoughts, different approaches. And we just live in a time where it feels like no matter what side you're on, it means that you are against the other side. That people who disagree with you, that it's somehow labeled hate. That disagreement's not okay. So we just feel this tension, I think, a lot right now. Like the slightest indication that you might be on some other side can get you demonized by a certain side. And then you might find yourself in this situation where you're listening to somebody from the other side, and that might get you canceled from your own side. And so you just see this divisiveness in our culture. I think we probably all felt it if you watched the debate from this past week. It's just this divisive spirit, and the way that people have handled that is to become tribalistic, where there's just no openness. It's very difficult to build a bridge. And some of you are feeling this in your families right now. The relationships are more on edge. And in the past, you could disagree on certain things and still get along, but now it seems to escalate. Do you have some of this? It seems to escalate more quickly. Like everybody just seems a little bit more tense, and what used to be kind of a little argument turns into a big argument, and didn't used to be name calling, but now there's name calling, and you don't remember the raised voices, but now it seems like people are raising their voices a lot more, and just a lot of division. And so one of the questions that I know that many of us answer as you scroll through social media, if you watch the news, is, well, what side am I gonna be on? What side am I gonna be on? And we're seeing even our culture now where people lose friends because they've chosen to have a certain perspective that's different from their friend's perspective. I've seen in this season something I've not seen much of in the past, where parents and children have stopped talking to each other because they're on separate sides of some issue politically or socially. And so we kind of wrestle with this idea of what side am I going to be on? But here's what we're going to see as we finish up John chapter 15. Jesus is going to remind his followers that it's not about what side you choose, it's about the fact that you've been chosen. And this really makes a difference for us as we live our faith out in a very divided culture. It's not about what side you choose. It's about the fact that you've been chosen. And chosen people don't get that caught up in choosing sides. That if you're a follower of Jesus, you've already been chosen, and that impacts how you live out your life in this very divided season. So here's what Jesus says in John chapter 15 to his followers. He says, "You didn't choose me. I chose you. I chose you on purpose, and I appointed you to produce lasting fruit." So I chose you on purpose, and I chose you for a purpose. I chose you on purpose and for a purpose to produce lasting fruit so that the Father will give you whatever you ask for using my name. And then Jesus says, this is my command. This is the root command. Love each other. Like, this is your purpose. Like, you don't really know what you should be about in this season. You're not really sure how to make a difference. A lot of your plans have gotten turned upside down. I have, Jesus says, saved you on purpose for a purpose, and your purpose is to love others. And so Jesus wants the disciples to understand that even though they're going to be in a world where they will often feel rejected and opposed, that they have been chosen. Don't forget that you've been chosen. When other people reject you, don't forget that I'm the one who chose you. And so I think what a lot of people are wrestling with these days is to say, okay, all right. So I'm a follower of Jesus. That means Jesus has chosen me. I'm on his side. But here's the question. What side is Jesus on? I get this question. Not necessarily this directly, but in one way or another, I get asked this question a lot. What side is Jesus on? Like, Kyle, I know you can't say it on camera. Like, I know you're not going to talk about it on the stage, but he's on my side, right? Like, he's on our side over here. And sometimes it's asked as a question. Sometimes it's more of a heads up. Hey, God, you know, don't you, that Jesus is on our side? You know that he's on our side of the political aisle? You know Jesus isn't on our side of this social disagreement. Jesus is on our side. And so I thought maybe it would be helpful just to clear these things up. Once and for all, just to save me some trouble over the next few months leading into the election. What side is Jesus on? You want to know? Like, is Jesus on the side of the Republicans or the side of the Democrats? Is he on the side of the maskers or the anti-maskers? Is Jesus on the side of the police or the protesters? Is he on the side of the gas station coffee or the coffee snobs? Is he on the side of CNN or is he on the side of Fox? What side is he on? And here's the answer. Jesus is on Jesus' side, right? Like, Jesus is on his own side. He's on his own side. And this is really hard for us because we want to take Jesus and we want to pull him onto our sides. That's not how it works. Like, I saw this thing going around the internet where people were trying to get others to write Jesus in as a write-in vote for president. Big movement. Thousands of people have agreed that they're going to write Jesus in for president of the United States as a write-in vote. Problem there. Jesus isn't running for president, right? Like, he's King of Kings. So he's not real interested in it. He's not real interested in that position. Like, don't do that to him. But we want to do that. We want to say, Jesus is on my side in all of this. And I guess what I would tell you is that this is not new for Jesus. Like, he dealt with this. During his ministry, people were constantly trying to pull him onto their sides. In fact, I would say that this is one of the reasons why people hated Jesus and ultimately killed him, is he wouldn't choose a side. And so you even had a time where they tried to force Jesus to be king. They were going to make him king by force. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't choose a side. And you had, even within the Jewish people, you had different political parties represented of how you should deal with the government at that time, the Roman occupation. And there were a group of people that were part of a political party, kind of a radical political party called the Zealots. And they believed that the government had overstepped, that the Roman occupation needed to be stopped, and no matter what it took. And so they were angry and they were violent, and they would do things like, carry knives in their cloak and stab a Roman guard and then disappear into the crowd. And And their mentality, the Zealots' mentality was, hey, we're going to do whatever it takes. Desperate times call for desperate measures. And they were sure that Jesus, that the Messiah would come and be on their side because they're the most committed and they're the most passionate. So of course, Jesus is on our side and Jesus is on his own side. But you had another political party called the Essenes, and they had a different approach. They saw the government occupation and abuse. They saw the cultural disintegration, and their solution to it wasn't to fight, but it was to flee. And they decided they were going to remove themselves, and they were going to go live in the mountains. And so that's what they did. John the Baptist grew up that way. So they lived in the mountains, away from everything happening politically or socially, saying, we're just not going to have anything to do with it. And they thought that when Jesus came, that when the Messiah came, that he would want to be on their side, because they're so committed that they had withdrawn from the world. So surely now Jesus is going to come and give them the keys to the kingdom. And Jesus was on his own side. And then religiously, you had a group called the Pharisees that were really conservative and strict and want to make it all about the law. You had a group called the Sadducees that were on a different side of the aisle, and they were more liberal and open. And they were both trying constantly to nail Jesus down. What side are you on, Jesus? He just wouldn't do it. Absolutely refused to take a side. Why? Because he was afraid? No, because he was on his own side, and he came to bring a kingdom. So Jesus came, and he just didn't do things the way people thought that he should. And as a result, he was opposed and rejected. So now he's talking to his followers, and he's saying to his followers, look, you're on my side. You've been chosen. So stop being so preoccupied about what side of things you're on down here, but just know that because you've been chosen by me, you're going to be hated. So this is what happens in John 15. He talks to them about being chosen. Some very affirming language. We'll look at it here in a minute. But then in verse 18, he says, because you've been chosen by me, you're going to be rejected by others. Because you've been chosen by me, other people are going to reject you. And he uses the word hate like 7 times in 8 verses. And the word hate here that he describes, how the disciples will be treated by the world. That word hate is not like this general, generic expression like I hate traffic. It's very personal. It's this idea that you've extended yourself in love to someone, and they haven't just treated you with indifference, but they have ridiculed you, and they have opposed you and rejected you. Jesus said, you can expect that. I have chosen you, but because I have chosen you, you're going to have these times where none of the sides accept you, because they want you to be on their side. I've seen that in this season. I have loved how united that we have been as a church the last 7 months. I am humbled by it. I'm blown away by it. I see it as the Holy Spirit at work within this church. I would also tell you that though I don't get many of them, I've had more of them in the last 7 months, of emails of people saying, why, the church is supposed to be over here, the church should be doing this, why isn't the church on this side, and what about that side? And just so many opinions saying, Jesus, the church should be on our side. And one of the things I have secretly taken pleasure in is the fact that I feel like it's pretty equal of how many people are frustrated about that. Like, I feel like it's pretty equal. Like, people on all different sides seem a little annoyed. I'm like, okay, maybe we're doing it right then. Because Jesus expressed this. You're chosen by me for my purposes, and because of that, the world's not going to know what to do with you. So let's look at this. Verse 18. Jesus said, if the world hates you, and this word if is like when it happens. It doesn't happen all the time. It's not that people don't ever like you, but when it happens, when the world hates you. And I think sometimes we have this idea that if we just don't say anything, if we just are quiet, that the world will like us. But you can't appease the world. Jesus said, look, if the world hates you, when the world hates you, if you're living your life in such a way that nobody is ever bothered by it, then you're doing it wrong, right? And so Jesus says, when the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. The world would love you as one of its own if you belong to it, if you would choose a side. The world would love you as one of its own if you would choose the world, but you are no longer part of the world. I have chosen you to come out of the world, so it doesn't know what to do with you. It hates you. So because you've been chosen, you will be rejected.